AEW All Out contained a lot of violence. Violence that we don't see in wrestling. Swerve Strickland had a syringe in the mouth. Bryan Danielson was suffocated with a plastic bag. And a lot of people are talking about this controversy. They're talking about this in a way that makes it seem like AEW should not be doing this. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. It ain't for me. It's definitely not for me. It's not for me by any means. And the reason why it's not for me is because I have been on the record for so many years talking about that level of violence is not really my thing. I don't really care about blood in pro wrestling. I don't think it's necessarily needed. I don't think AEW needs to do it, but they did it. And it's not a bad thing that they did it. In fact, I would say it's a good thing that they did it because that is what makes them the alternative to WWE. WWE doesn't do that, AEW does. If it's not for you, you simply don't have to watch. But AEW exercised two different storylines in a way that truly made the storylines matter. First of all, Hangman Page and Swerve literally dealt with a home invasion and a house being burnt down. So, of course, 1,000,000% AEW having a steel cage match and literally Hangman Page getting so violent, nearly killing Swerve. That right there, my friends, is part of the story. And I'm going to say this because a lot of people seem to allow this to go over their head, and I want this clipped. If you guys can clip this now. Pro wrestling is no different than watching a Hollywood movie. And I swear to God, I truly mean this. You go on TBS or TNT or USA Network or Fox or FX. You go on any of these channels. You're flipping the channels on the remote, and you have storylines within these TV series and movies where people are literally dying in the most worst ways possible. Okay? The worst scenarios imaginable are happening in other TV shows. Why is it that pro wrestling gets criticized for doing something like this? I can fully admit it's not for me. I can fully admit that I don't personally like it. But why is pro wrestling being judged differently than some of these other shows that are happening? Pro wrestling is scripted entertainment. And not to mention, these two storylines are massive storylines for AEW. It got a reaction. And I don't know why the world is getting so soft when it comes to pro wrestling, but when it happens in other TV shows, and by the way, the stuff happening in other TV shows are far worse, but when it happens in those TV shows, nobody bats an eye. But something drastically happens in pro wrestling, and people immediately think that it's not acceptable. And so what ends up happening is people go on Twitter and they're saying, this is bad for pro wrestling. This is bad for AEW. This is bad. This is disgusting. I can't believe they would do this. I'm seeing the worst takes of all. And the only reason why they're doing it is because it is generating so much more noise on social media. And I'm here to tell you guys that for AEW to go this route, it's completely fine. If they lose advertising partners, they lose advertising partners. That's the risk associated with doing stuff like this. But you as a fan should not be using that as a way to judge the product. At the same time, too, we have to acknowledge that AEW, for a very long time, has been getting compared to WWE. We know that WWE will not do this. We understand that. We know very damn well that WWE would not do this because WWE is rated PG. AEW is not. There's different standards. But Swerve Strickland getting the hell beat out of him, and you got everybody complaining about this for no reason because they want to be fake outraged. And so again, I'm going to say this. People are saying it's pro wrestling. It's not a movie. Pro wrestling isn't real. I don't care how many people that offends, but it's not. The damage that they take in the ring, they protect each other as best as they could. But yeah, it hurts. I'm not stupid. I'm not oblivious to this. It hurts. But they are trained professionals. Just like in movies, those are actors. So when you watch Swerve Strickland getting the hell beat out of him, guys, They work together to orchestrate this. That's what makes pro wrestling an art. Pro wrestling is an art because for a couple minutes, they make you forget that it's scripted. By the way, those are the best stories. Those are the best wrestling matches. Those are the best moments in pro wrestling when they can make you forget that it's not actually scripted. But the reality is it is scripted, and the standards for Hollywood and the standards for pro wrestling, it will never make sense to me. There are so much more worse things that are happening on the TV shows, especially on Warner Bros. Discovery. Through all of their TV channels that they have so much worse than what happened to Swerve and Bryan Danielson. And what's even crazier is social media wasn't prevalent. It wasn't around back then, but social media made this shit worse because everybody wants to be fake outraged. And then what's even crazier about that is people forget that Big Boss Man was hung from the Hell in a Cell. And the reaction, yeah, I'm sure it's not positive, but the reality is quite simple. That's the way it was scripted. That's the way they orchestrated it. And don't even get me started on AEW All Out having the chair shot to the head for Swerve Strickland. A lot of people who are not experts in this are talking about this. Now, me personally, I don't like chair shots to the head. I cringe when I see them. Why? The sound effect, the way they sell it, it just looks so gruesome, the way they do this shit. Like, it actually looks like it hurts. But again, these are trained performers. Yes, we know a lot about concussions. Guys, Tony Khan and AEW are not running a zoo. They're doing this in a constructed way. And so, yes, I do believe it's controversial. That's exactly why they do it. They got people talking. That's exactly the point of it. But to sit here and argue about the semantics of it is absolutely ridiculous. I truly do believe that. Because me personally, as I said, I'm not a fan of this type of stuff. It's not, to me, it's not exciting. It's not really, it doesn't make or break a match, in my opinion. I don't think you need all the blood. I don't think you need all of that. But it is so understandable as to why they would do it. Look at the storyline. Keep in mind, AEW also told you in kayfabe that the match was not sanctioned. All Out was a very violent program. To be honest with you, I was actually shocked. I was actually more so shocked with Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale. Because, by the way, if you guys didn't know, their match is arguably the greatest women's match in AEW history. And then we saw BCC turn on Bryan Danielson and Wheeler Yuta. And Jon Moxley literally suffocated Bryan Danielson. A lot of people are mad about that. A lot of people are upset about that. It got a little too real for them. Then you get Swerve and Hangman, and they're crossing the line in certain ways that people are just cringing at it. They're shaken up by it. But that is the point. And by the way, all three of those stories actually matter, and they're justifiable. Look at what BCC is doing. It's a heel turn. Willow and Chris Statlander have been having a great feud. Chicago street fight. And I think what's often happening is like, this is not a situation where like AEW is just sending them out there and saying, okay, go ahead and do this and that's it. Like, there's a lot of work that is done to make these things happen. I think for AEW, that's what's going to make them different from WWE. They are willing to push the envelope of what is acceptable and what is not. WWE is not willing to do it. Now, if AEW was sending their performers out there and saying, take chair shots to the head, but then the chairs aren't gimmicked, I think that would be silly and it would be very amateurish. It would be very unprofessional. But I don't think for one second that Tony Khan is a dumbass and that he would just allow his talent to do things unsafely. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't like ranting about shit like this, but I could even admit myself as a person who is not a fan of this type of stuff, I understand why they did it, and I don't think it's actually that bad. And I feel like this is one of those things where this is where one of the things, like with social media and stuff, it's a lot of fake outrage. and everybody wants their voices heard, and everybody wants to feel like their opinion matters when it comes to the safety and this and all this shit. But guys, they have people they have to listen to. Tony Khan has literally people that he has to listen to. If TV partners say we don't want it, then they're not going to get it. But I am super tired of the fact that we have gotten to a point where it's acceptable for things that are far worse than this to happen in movies and TV shows. And then for some reason in pro wrestling, when they do it, it's bad. And I'm sorry, but I just will not accept that. Even if it's not for me, even if it's not my cup of tea, I just cannot accept that. It's scripted entertainment. The idea is to get people talking. And yeah, will it lose AEW TV partners or sponsorships? It's a possibility. But that's none of my business, and I don't care about that. That's their fault. If you want to be the alternative and you can't get advertisers, that's going to be the case. But meanwhile, we're just talking about AEW potentially joining Fox. Yeah, Fox might not let AEW do that. I don't know. But that's something that needed to be said. And I'm sorry, but there's too many people out here, podcasters, Twitter accounts, too many people grifting off the idea that this makes AEW amateurish or it makes them unprofessional, whatever. And I don't believe those takes are genuine. Did AEW go too far? Yes, they did. That was the point. That was the intention. And I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. It really is.